Imagine this. You wake up. Before your feet even touch the floor, your hand reaches for a small, glowing rectangle. Notifications bloom on the screen like digital pollen. Someone liked your photo. A friend sent a meme. Breaking news screams catastrophe in bold type. You scroll without thinking. Your thumb moves like it's tracing some ancient ritual. 10 minutes pass, then 20. And somewhere beneath the flood of noise, a strange emptiness lingers. You tell yourself it's just how the world works now. Everyone does it. It's normal. But here's a question: what are you actually reaching for? It's not connection. If it were, you'd feel full after texting all day. But instead, you're more isolated than ever. It's not entertainment. That would suggest joy, but you're left numb, bored even while being overstimulated. It's not information. If that were the case, the more you scrolled, the wiser you'd become. But all that grows is a kind of quiet panic, a splintering of attention. You're not addicted to your phone. You're addicted to escape, not just from boredom, but from the unbearable tension of being alone with yourself. From silence, from the slow and aching realization that something in you feels off. You escape from questions you can't answer, from a life that feels increasingly artificial, from the creeping suspicion that everything is noise and nothing is meaning. We live in an age where we are constantly connected, but rarely present, where we are flooded with options yet feel paralyzed, where we have endless entertainment but an epidemic of depression. Why? Why do we check our phones hundreds of times a day, often without any real reason? Why do we scroll for hours, only to feel hollow afterward, guilty, irritated, and strangely distant from ourselves? And why, when we finally put the phone down, does the silence feel like a threat? There's a terrifying possibility that our constant scrolling isn't a side effect of bad habits or poor time management. It's a symptom of something far deeper, a spiritual amnesia, a kind of inner exile. You aren't just distracted, you're dislocated from your own life. Let's be honest. Most people are not afraid of boredom. They're afraid of awareness. Because awareness reveals discomfort. It unmasks the things you've buried: your discontent, your unresolved pain, the goals you've abandoned, the person you promised you'd become but never did. The phone becomes a portal not to the world, but away from it, away from you. But here's the paradox: the more we try to escape ourselves, the more we become imprisoned by the very thing we use to flee. What if every time you scroll, you're not relaxing, you're running? What if the calm you feel while using your phone isn't peace, but sedation? A digital anesthesia designed to keep you from feeling too much. Consider this: you've never known a version of yourself without constant stimulation. You may have forgotten how to be still without fidgeting, how to exist without checking, how to think without interruption. But here's the truth we never say aloud. The silence you avoid is trying to teach you something. And the moment you stop escaping is the moment you might finally hear it. So the real question isn't, why can't I stop using my phone? It's, what is my phone protecting me from feeling? And even more haunting, who might I become if I faced what I've spent so long trying to avoid? You see, this isn't just about technology. It's not about screen time or productivity hacks or digital detoxes. That's surface-level thinking. This is about the architecture of your psyche, about a deep existential wound that no app can patch, about a society built to keep you disconnected from yourself, then blame you for it. You're not weak. You're not lazy. You're not broken. But you are asleep, and something in you, something old, something true, is starting to stir. You feel it when you close your eyes at night and your thoughts become too loud. You feel it in moments of beauty that slip past too quickly because you couldn't stay present long enough to feel them. You feel it every time you look around and ask, is this it? So let's go deeper. Let's look beneath the surface, into the psychological and philosophical machinery that drives this escape. Let's uncover why we run from ourselves and what it would take to finally stop. Because the answer isn't just in your screen, it's in your soul. And once you see what's really happening, you won't just want to put the phone down. You'll want to wake up. Let's begin with a simple truth. You were not born afraid of silence. You were not born needing constant stimulation. As a child, you could stare at the ceiling and feel wonder. You could sit alone and invent a world from nothing. But somewhere along the line, that capacity to be with yourself, to simply be, began to decay. So what happened? To understand the roots of this modern escape, we must descend, not into technology, but into the soul. The phone is only the surface. The deeper architecture lies within a society that conditions us to run, a psyche that fears stillness, and a culture that rewards disconnection while disguising it as engagement. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden, repressed side of the self that we deny, ignore, or bury. It contains everything we've been told is unacceptable: sadness, fear, rage, insecurity, envy, even deep longing. In Jung's view, we spend much of our lives constructing elaborate defenses to avoid this darkness. But avoidance has a cost. We become strangers to ourselves. And this is where the phone becomes a perfect escape. Because it offers the illusion of activity without effort, connection without vulnerability, stimulation without purpose. It becomes the bridge between our numbness and our refusal to feel. But what we're really doing is projecting our inner noise onto a screen, hoping something out there will save us from what's in here. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it coming long before the iPhone. He wrote of the last man, a creature of comfort, distraction, and shallow pleasure, terrified of discomfort and depth. The last man doesn't seek meaning, he seeks sedation. They blink, Nietzsche said, and they live longer. Is that not what we've become? Blinking into screens, numbing ourselves with content, extending life while abandoning the very essence of it. Arthur Schopenhauer, in his famously bleak worldview, suggested that most human behavior stems from a fundamental dissatisfaction with existence. He believed our endless striving, our compulsive searching, arises because desire is insatiable, and happiness, at best, is fleeting relief. The phone, then, is a perfect symbol of Schopenhauer's despair. We scroll not to be happy, but to temporarily forget that we are not. Yet, perhaps the most terrifying insight comes from Jean-Paul Sartre, who claimed that existence precedes essence. In other words, we are not born with a predetermined identity. We become ourselves through our choices. But herein lies the burden. With freedom comes responsibility. To exist authentically is to confront the weight of your own freedom and the terrifying fact that no one will define your life but you. Now ask yourself, how many times have you picked up your phone, not because you wanted to, but because you didn't want to face what's left when you don't? We've built a world that's allergic to depth. Capitalism depends on your dissatisfaction. It thrives when you're distracted, insecure, and constantly seeking more. Every notification is a micro-dose of dopamine. Every scroll keeps the machine running. But the machine doesn't care if you're lost. It only cares that you're engaged. Aldous Huxley once warned of a future not ruled by tyranny, but by pleasure. In Brave New World, people are not controlled by fear, but by comfort, stimulation, and distraction. They are sedated into obedience. It is not a boot on the neck. It is a pill in the bloodstream. Or, perhaps, today a glowing screen in the palm. The philosophers warned us, but we didn't listen. Now we live in a time when solitude is seen as a threat. Stillness is uncomfortable. Silence is unbearable. We don't just avoid pain. We avoid presence. And the more we run, the more we hollow out the capacity to be fully alive. But here's the tragedy. The things we fear most, boredom, pain, emotional discomfort, are not the enemies. They are the doorway. They are the beginning of self-awareness, of authenticity, of actual freedom. The phone is not the cage. Your fear of facing yourself is. Gabor Maté, whose work on trauma and addiction is both piercing and compassionate, argues that addiction isn't about substances or devices. It's about pain. The question is not why the addiction, he says, but why the pain. When we scroll compulsively, we are medicating. We are avoiding. We are soothing a wound we do not fully understand. And that's the hidden problem. You're not addicted to your phone. You're addicted to escape. Escape from failure, from inadequacy, from shame, from the grief you never processed, from the childhood pain you minimized, from the future that feels overwhelming, from the past you cannot rewrite. Your phone is just the needle. The real drug is avoidance, and the world you live in, it's designed to keep you dosed. So what happens when you unplug, when you sit in silence, when you let the pain surface, unmedicated, unfiltered? Something terrifying and something true. We are reaching a breaking point. The human psyche wasn't built for infinite stimulation and infinite avoidance. Eventually, the inner world begins to rupture. Anxiety becomes chronic, depression deepens, identity collapses, and suddenly, you're not just escaping, you're dissolving. The irony is unbearable. In trying to avoid suffering, you become enslaved to it. But not all is lost. Because the cracks in the system, the breakdowns, the moments of emptiness, the nights when nothing feels okay, these are signals. They're not signs of weakness. They're invitations to wake up. And now that you've begun to see the roots of this trap, the only question that matters is, will you go deeper or go back to sleep? Because in the next step lies the confrontation, the revelation, the cost of continuing, and the courage to stop. They say the worst kind of prison is the one you don't know you're in. By now, you've likely felt it, the vague unease that something is off, that your life is happening through a glass pane, just out of reach. You touch your phone more times a day than you touch another human being. You communicate constantly, but feel disconnected. You laugh at memes, cry at videos, scroll through strangers' lives. But when you put it down, there's a quiet devastation, a sense that you're not really living. This is not just a feeling. This is a psychological event, a subtle, creeping erosion of your very self. And it's happening to almost everyone. Let's begin with the mind. The human brain is a pattern-detecting, meaning-making machine, but it is also fragile, vulnerable to overload. When you flood it with an unending torrent of stimulus, your neurological systems begin to malfunction. You lose the ability to focus deeply. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of you responsible for long-term planning, self-control, and reflection, begins to atrophy. You become reactive, impulsive, scattered. It's not just that you can't think clearly. It's that you lose the will to try. And this isn't just theory. MRI scans show changes in brain structure among heavy tech users. Gray matter density in areas linked to empathy, decision-making, and emotional regulation begins to shrink. Dopamine circuits become desensitized. You need more stimulation to feel less pleasure. You become emotionally numb, but cognitively anxious. A perfect storm of disconnection and inner chaos. But it goes even deeper. This escape we indulge in, this compulsion to scroll, to refresh, to click, is not neutral. It reshapes your emotional landscape. Every time you avoid discomfort by picking up the phone, you teach your nervous system a dangerous lesson. I cannot tolerate reality. You slowly unlearn how to sit with sadness, how to face uncertainty, how to be bored, how to listen, how to be fully present in a single moment without reaching for relief. Over time, this avoidance becomes your identity. You don't just run from pain. You become a runner. The screen isn't just something you look at. It becomes the lens through which you see the world. And the result, you begin to feel more like a character in your life than the author of it. Ask yourself, when was the last time you made a choice? Not a reaction, not a habit, but a deliberate choice about how you spent your time. When was the last time you sat with your own thoughts for more than 5 minutes? When was the last time you were still and didn't immediately reach for a distraction. Now take that absence and multiply it across years. That is the unseen cost, and it doesn't end with you. The collective consequence of millions of people numbing themselves is the slow decay of society's depth. Conversations become shallow, creativity dries up, politics devolves into spectacle, relationships fracture into performative snapshots. Even empathy, once our greatest strength, becomes pixelated and transactional. We no longer ask, "Is this true?" We ask, "Does it perform well? Does it feel good right now? Will it go viral?" But meaning is not born from pleasure. It is born from presence. And presence requires suffering. Without struggle, there is no depth. Without pain, no growth. Without silence, no voice. And yet, we are conditioning ourselves and entire generations to fear the very things that make life real. Take loneliness, for example, one of the most feared emotions in modern life. We've built entire industries to avoid it, but loneliness is not a curse. It is a mirror. It tells you where you are disconnected, from others, from meaning, from your own soul. But instead of listening, we mute it. We scroll, we sedate, and the signal becomes a symptom. It's the same with anxiety. Most people don't have an anxiety disorder. They have a life disorder. They live in ways that violate their deepest values, ignore their emotional needs, and reject their true nature. The body knows. The soul protests. But instead of changing course, they escape into the flickering world of illusion. This is not just a personal crisis. It's a spiritual one. We've replaced ritual with routine, wonder with convenience, depth with content. And in doing so, we have committed a quiet form of self-abandonment. Consider this: when you numb your inner world, you don't just lose pain. You lose intuition. You lose the voice that tells you when something is wrong. The whisper that says, "This isn't who you are." That ancient part of you, your compass, your conscience, your core, gets drowned out in the static. And without it, you become easy to control. Because people who are disconnected from themselves are easier to manipulate, easier to sell to, easier to herd. They don't ask real questions. They don't demand real change. They're too busy scrolling, too busy escaping, too busy surviving. But here's the cruel ironing: the more you escape, the more you feel the need to escape. The very act of avoiding pain creates more of it. The silence you fear grows louder. The emptiness deepens. And eventually, you reach a point where even the distractions stop working. That's when the breakdown happens. But there is another option. Before the breakdown becomes a collapse, you can choose to wake up, to stop running, to turn around and face the thing you've been trying so hard not to see. And in doing so, you reclaim something extraordinary: the ability to be here, to feel pain without fleeing, to feel joy without performing, to feel lost without panicking, to feel alive without escaping. Because only when you stop escaping can you begin to rebuild. And that rebuilding begins with a rebellion, not against technology, not against the world, but against your own reflex to run. That's where we're going next. Because if you've made it this far, you're not just interested in understanding the problem. You're ready to challenge it. You are not powerless. You are not weak. You are simply unpracticed at being fully alive. And now you stand at the threshold. On one side is the familiar pull of comfort, the ever-glowing screen whispering sweet nothings to your restless soul. On the other side is rebellion, not a loud, dramatic revolt, but a quiet, terrifying act of war against the part of you that chooses sedation over self. Let's be clear, this isn't about deleting your phone, escaping modern life, or moving into the woods to churn butter and write manifestos. This rebellion is internal, psychological, existential. It begins not with an action, but with a confrontation. Sit still. Do nothing. Put the phone in another room. Then wait. Wait for the anxiety to come. Wait for the boredom to scratch at the edges of your brain. Wait for that small, unbearable voice to surface, the one you've silenced with pixels and playlists and productivity. Listen to it. Not to obey it, but to know it. To finally hear yourself. Most people will never do this. They'll chase one distraction after another until their life is over. But you, if you're willing, can do something extraordinary. You can choose to feel. That is rebellion in a world that profits from your numbness. Because to feel again is to reclaim your humanity. It is to stand in the burning center of your own experience and say, I will not look away. Here's the paradox: the pain you're running from contains the key to your freedom. Carl Jung said, the gold is in the dark. What he meant is that the parts of yourself you've rejected, the fear, the shame, the longing, the confusion, are not your enemies. They are your unrealized power, your unintegrated wholeness, your future self wrapped in the skin of suffering. Shadow work is not a trend. It's not a buzzword. It's the courageous, often brutal task of facing the rejected self and saying, I will no longer exile you. To break free, you must stop chasing light and start integrating darkness. But how? You begin by doing the most counterintuitive thing possible. You slow down. In a culture that worships speed, slowness is radical. It forces presence. It reintroduces you time as it actually unfolds. Slowness allows the fog of stimulation to clear. And when it does, you'll find something shocking underneath. You're still here, unprocessed, unfelt, unfinished. And that's when the real work begins. Because healing doesn't happen through escape. It happens through re-entry into your body, your breath, your actual life. The rebellion is not in running from your addictions. It's in returning to what those addictions try to erase. Start small. Walk without your phone. Eat in silence. Let a difficult emotion rise without medicating it with content. Pause before reacting. Breathe deeper than necessary. These acts are not minor. They are micro-revolutions. Because each time you choose presence over distraction, you send a signal to your nervous system. It is safe to be here. And with time, that becomes truth. But rebellion isn't just about silence and stillness. It's also about creation. And Nietzsche, he didn't just criticize modern man for being weak and passive. He called for the Bermensch, the one who creates values, who shapes their own life as a work of art. This is your task, not to consume endlessly, but to create consciously. Pick up a pen. Make music. Build something. Speak truth that makes your voice tremble. These are not hobbies. They are lifelines. Every act of creation is a rejection of passivity. It is saying to the world, I will not be sedated into irrelevance. I will participate in the making of meaning. And as you create, you begin to rewire your reward system. Instead of chasing cheap dopamine hits from endless scrolling, you learn to savor deep satisfaction. The satisfaction of completing something hard, of being in process, of wrestling with the real instead of being spoon-fed illusion. This is what Viktor Frankl meant when he said, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. The antidote to addiction isn't abstinence. It's meaning, purpose, intention. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding that I'm meant to become? The answer to that question is your compass. Let it guide your rebellion. But don't do it alone. This world wants you isolated, silos of scrolling, pods performance. But healing requires connection, the real kind, the messy, vulnerable, unscripted kind. Talk to someone and say what you actually mean, not the filtered version, not the performative one, the scared version, the confused one, the self who doesn't have it all figured out. Let them see you. Not everyone will stay, but the ones who do, that's your tribe. And rebellion loves community. You are not a lone revolutionary. You are part of something deeper, a quiet uprising of souls remembering what it means to be human. And one last thing, you will fail. You will fall back into escape. You'll numb again, scroll again, lose days to algorithms and autopilot. Forgive yourself, because rebellion isn't a single act. It's a way of being, a daily choice to return, to remember, to rebuild. Every time you fall and rise again, You weaken the hold of the addiction. Every time you choose presence over performance, you reclaim another inch of your sovereignty. And every time you stop running, you come one step closer to the truth you've been avoiding all along. Which brings us to the final stage, the ultimate realization, the insight that, once seen, cannot be unseen. You've broken through the surface. You've seen the trap. You've started to fight back. But there is one final revelation that changes everything. Are you ready to face it? Because in the next moment, the final truth will arrive, and it will not comfort you, but it will set you free. The truth you've avoided not just with screens, but with every habit of escape. Every scroll, every binge, every anxious reach for stimulation that promised relief, but delivered only emptiness. You're not addicted to your phone. You're not addicted to Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the news, porn, dopamine, or even distraction itself. You are addicted to the idea that life should be painless, that happiness is your baseline, that discomfort is a mistake, that boredom is a failure, that sadness is a disease, that stillness is wasted time, that pain is always a problem to solve rather than a signal to listen to. You've been taught to pathologize your humanity, to numb the ache of being alive rather than explore it. And so, when life inevitably becomes heavy, as it does for everyone, you retreat. Not out of weakness, but out of conditioning. Because you were never taught how to suffer well. You were only taught how to escape fast. But here's the final, unavoidable truth: there is no escape. Not really. Not from the weight of existence. Not from the abyss that stares back when the noise dies down. Not from the deep, aching responsibility of having a self. You can run for years. You can drown in apps and distractions and half-lived conversations. You can achieve, entertain, accumulate. You can simulate happiness with photos and playlists and productivity hacks. But eventually, something inside you will break open. And when it does, the truth will come pouring out like a flood. The thing you're really running from is yourself. That's it. The phone was never the problem. The content was never the enemy. They were just mirrors, reflecting back the parts of you that feel too unbearable to hold. The emptiness, the insecurity, the fear of meaninglessness, the gnawing sense that you're wasting your one, short, irretrievable life. The device in your hand didn't create that. It only gave you a way to look away. But now, here you are, no more looking away. No more escape. And in that moment, raw, unfiltered, trembling with truth, you are finally free. Because when you stop running, you start returning. To what? To the source of your aliveness. To the mystery of your being. To the unbearable beauty of simply being here. This isn't a fantasy. It's reality. And reality is brutal. But it's also sacred. You will feel pain, but it will be your pain, not something outsourced to a screen. You will feel loneliness, but you'll realize it's not a curse. It's an invitation. You will feel boredom, and you'll discover that just beneath it lies your creativity, your hunger, your vision. You will feel anxiety, and you'll come to see that it's not a malfunction. It's a compass pointing toward what matters most. Every emotion you tried to avoid is actually a doorway, a teacher, a guide, and once you stop running from them, they transform. What was once fear becomes clarity. What was once boredom becomes yearning. What was once shame becomes humility. What was once emptiness becomes space. And in that space, you can begin again. You are not broken. You are unpracticed at presence. You are not lazy. You are unconvinced life is worth showing up for. You are not scattered. You are desperate for something real. And real is what you're here for. Not curated, not simulated, but real. The sweat of real effort, the terror of real connection, the silence of real contemplation, the grief of real loss, the ecstasy of real joy, the chaos and absurdity and awe of real life. But here's the last twist in this story. Escape was never your enemy. It was your teacher, because every time you escaped, you revealed what you couldn't yet face. And every time you wake up to your own patterns, you don't just break free. You grow up. You become less of a consumer and more of a creator. Less of a reactor, more of a responder. Less of a fragment, more of a whole. This is what the great philosophers and mystics have always pointed to. Nietzsche called it becoming who you are. Jung called it individuation. Frankl called it the will to meaning. Huxley called it waking from the dream. They were all saying the same thing. You are not here to escape life. You are here to endure it, shape it, and be transformed by it. And now that you've stopped running, now that you've seen the machinery of addiction for what it really is, you can begin the truest work they're eyeing, the work of returning to yourself, the work of staying. So sit with the silence a little longer. Let boredom stretch you instead of scare you. Let pain deepen you instead of harden you. Let uncertainty teach you instead of paralyze you. And remember this, every moment you choose to face reality instead of flee it, you reclaim a piece of your soul. That is the ultimate rebellion. That is the only freedom that lasts. And that is the truth no algorithm will ever offer you. Because it can't be sold. It can't be packaged. It can only be lived.